Do you know what truly drives a narcissist insane, even without you yelling or arguing? It's your calm. Not silence out of fear, but stillness loaded with power. The kind of response that's quiet, sharp, and untouchable. The kind that says, "You don't get to control me anymore." In today's video, I'm going to share with you 8 deadly calm responses that can absolutely disarm, expose, and humiliate any narcissist. Why are these so powerful? Because narcissists don't fear threats, they fear composure. They feed off chaos and control. But when you stop playing their game, when you respond with calm conviction, that's when you take back the power. These aren't just phrases, they are boundaries, declarations, and tools for emotional freedom. They protect you from the cycle of explaining, reacting, and proving yourself over and over again. So if you've ever felt trapped, manipulated, or emotionally exhausted in a toxic relationship, this video is for you. Watch all the way to the end, because I won't just tell you what to say. I'll break down the psychology behind each phrase so you know exactly why it works. And don't forget to subscribe if you're ready to master the silent strength that narcissists fear most, because your calm is their greatest defeat. 1. You're entitled to feel that way. It sounds kind, but it's a scalpel in disguise. At first glance, this phrase seems polite, even empathetic, like you're listening, like you care. But don't be fooled by its softness. This is one of the most powerful psychological responses you can give, especially when facing a narcissist. When a narcissist comes at you with accusations, anger, or emotional manipulation, what they really want isn't the truth. It's your reaction. They want you to lose control. They want you to defend, explain, justify, explode, cry, anything that gets you tangled in their emotional net. But in that exact moment, when you calmly look them in the eye and say, "You're entitled to feel that way," the entire game collapses. Why? Because you've just cut the emotional cord they use to control you. You're not denying their feelings, but you're not agreeing with them either. You're not arguing, not fixing, not submitting. You're simply not playing. And for a narcissist, that's their worst nightmare. This phrase is a subtle form of emotional disengagement. It signals, "I'm not stepping into your chaos. Your emotions are yours. I'm not responsible for them." That is the core of psychological freedom, separating your identity from someone else's reaction. It's also a passive power move. When someone criticizes you, insults you, or throws blame your way, you don't need to win the argument. You only need to say, "You're entitled to feel that way," and walk away emotionally unshaken. No defense, no apology, just clarity. That's the kind of response that destroys their grip without confrontation. Some may ask, "Isn't that a little cold?" The answer is no. It's not cold, it's clear. It's a boundary, and boundaries require firmness, not guilt. You're not lying to please them. You're not fighting to be right. You're just stating a simple truth. Everyone has the right to feel whatever they feel, even if those feelings are toxic, distorted, or wrong. But you are not obligated to respond to it. In practice, this phrase will feel like a slap in the ego to a narcissist. They may double down. They may say, "So you think I'm wrong," or "You're dismissing my emotions." But remember, you don't need to explain. You've already said all you need to say. And if necessary, you can calmly repeat it. "I understand. You're entitled to feel that way." Then stay rooted in your truth. This phrase isn't a win in logic, it's a win in energy. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding the fire. When you remain calm, you retain control. And when you stop giving them the emotional response they crave, they lose all leverage. It's like pulling the plug on their power supply. Game over. And here's the best part. You don't have to be rude, you don't have to hurt anyone, and you don't have to teach them a lesson. All you need is calm, clarity, and consistency. You're entitled to feel that way. It's not just a phrase, it's a declaration that you've detached from the emotional manipulation, that you no longer need the approval of someone who twists truth, that you've come back to yourself, and you're no longer explaining your worth. 2. I don't think we see this the same way. When you say this to a narcissist, you're not arguing. You're not agreeing either. You're withdrawing all emotional fuel from the confrontation and sending a clear message. I'm no longer letting you dictate my perception of reality. This phrase isn't about proving who's right or wrong. It's not a challenge or a counterattack. It's a quiet declaration. I see through your distortion, and I choose not to play. And that, right there, deeply wounds a narcissist because their identity depends on controlling how others perceive them. Narcissists try to pull you into their world, a world where black is white, where your words are twisted and where your feelings are always too much or irrational. They don't want truth. They want you to surrender to their narrative. They don't seek understanding. They demand submission. So when you look them in the eye and calmly say, I don't think we see this the same way, what you're really doing is removing yourself from the board. You're refusing to play a game where the rules constantly shift and they're always the winner. Here's the truth. You're not obligated to convince a narcissist to understand you. And they have no right to make you question your reality simply because they refuse to acknowledge it. This phrase is a boundary. It's your way of saying, I see what you're doing and I'm not engaging. It's not hostile. It doesn't demand anything. It's simple, grounded, and incredibly powerful. It leaves them confused, powerless, and angry because they have nothing to fight against. You haven't attacked them, you've just refused to be led. Usually, after hearing this, a narcissist will try to reel you back in with guilt or blame. Oh, so I'm always the one who's wrong. Only your opinion matters, right? But you've already ended the game. You're no longer participating in the emotional chess match. You're no longer stuck in the spiral of circular arguments and twisted logic. You can simply smile, stay calm, and repeat, I don't think we see this the same way. And then, silence. This is where your power is reclaimed, not through rage, not through logic, but through stillness, clarity, and non-reaction. And that is something the narcissist cannot bear. You're teaching yourself something crucial, that you don't need agreement to feel valid. You don't need to be understood to know your worth. And you don't have to win an argument to protect your peace. You just need to stand your ground and calmly repeat, I don't think we see this the same way, and walk away from the conversation like someone who's already won, not by fighting, but by refusing to play. 3. I've said what I needed to say. If you've ever argued with a narcissist, you know what it feels like. A conversation that never ends. You say something, they twist it. You clarify, they pretend not to understand. You assert your boundaries, and they turn it around to make you the problem. And so, you get stuck in a never-ending loop of arguments. Not because you want to be there, but because they intentionally keep you there, feeding on your need to be heard, to be understood, to be seen. But when you say, I've said what I needed to say, you break the loop. Not with shouting, but with clarity, firmness, and emotional sovereignty. You're reclaiming the authority to end the conversation. You're no longer allowing them to steer, bait, or derail your message. You're refusing to play the game before they can turn it into a performance for their ego. And that infuriates them. Because for narcissists, arguments aren't about resolution. They're about control. They need you to keep talking so they can keep distorting, reframing, and reshaping the narrative into something that serves them. But when you shut it down with a grounded sentence, I've said what I needed to say, they lose their grip. You're not reacting. You're not over-explaining. You're not begging to be understood. And that means they no longer have any power over you. They may try to provoke you. Oh, so we're done talking now? Wow, guess you're just running away. You don't even care how I feel, do you? But you see through it. You know this is just another ploy, part of the endless cycle of attack, defend, reverse the blame. You don't owe them another word. You've spoken your truth, and that is enough. By standing firm, you're doing what narcissists fear most. You're ending the game. You're refusing to let them feed off your time, attention, and clarity, and that, to them, is a humiliating defeat. You're protecting your mental space. You're no longer using your voice to beg for validation from someone who never intended to give it. You're not trying to win the argument with logic. You're winning your freedom through conscious disengagement, and that is the real victory. 4. This conversation is over. To a healthy person, this sentence might simply indicate the end of an unproductive conversation, but to a narcissist, it's a grave insult, because it denies them what they crave most: access to your mind and emotions. Narcissists don't communicate to understand, they communicate to control. Every word they speak, every question they ask is a hook, crafted to snag your emotions and reel you back into their game, where they always get to make the first move. But when you say, "This conversation is over," you're not just ending a dialogue, you're shutting down the entire script they've carefully written. You refuse the bait, you refuse to offer another explanation, you refuse to act in the emotional play they've cast you in. This sentence is not anger. It's not slamming fists, not shouting. On the contrary, it is a decisive action spoken with a terrifying calmness, and that calm is what makes them lose control. They may respond with dramatic flares. "Oh sure, run away like you always do. Silence is the only thing you're good at." You don't care about anyone but yourself. But you don't need to respond, because that's how you know they're unraveling. They feel the loss of control and are scrambling to pull you back into the loop, into arguing, explaining, apologizing. But you're done. You've chosen to step out of the chaos. You don't need them to understand, and you don't need their forgiveness. You need peace. And to protect that peace, you set a boundary. This conversation is over. Is how you say, "I'm no longer available for this emotional drain," is how you declare that you are no longer the emotional supply for their manipulation. And in the narcissist world, where they only exist through your reactions, your silent, calm finality is their greatest nightmare. You don't need to win the argument, you just need to not play, and only then do you truly win. 5. I'm prioritizing my peace right now. This isn't just a sentence, it's a declaration, a shield, silent but more powerful than any counterattack. When you say this, you're stating a fundamental truth. I have the right to control my energy, and I refuse to let anyone, be it a partner, friend, or family member, violate that peace. It may sound calm, but to a manipulator, this sentence lands like a punch to their fragile ego. Because it means they're no longer the center of your universe, they no longer dominate your thoughts or dictate your emotions, and for someone who thrives on chaos, your decision to prioritize peace is a silent humiliation. They'll try to disrupt it. "Oh, so I'm the reason you're not at peace? You're just running away, not choosing peace." Always using mental health as an excuse to dodge accountability. But here's the truth, those words don't shake you anymore. Because you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. You're not selfish for stepping away from what exhausts you. You're not weak for wanting stillness. You're awakening. This phrase doesn't apologize, it doesn't beg to be understood, it doesn't ask for permission, it simply says, "I'm taking care of myself." And that's enough. Enough to crack the illusion the narcissist built, because you no longer need their validation to feel worthy. You've stopped fighting to be seen, you've walked away from the battlefield, and in that quiet, you've already won. "I'm prioritizing my peace right now" is an act of spiritual liberation. It's how you pull your energy back from the emotional vortex they once controlled. It's how you declare, peace doesn't require permission, it only requires a choice. 6. That's not going to work on me. This isn't a threat, it's not anger, and it's definitely not a declaration of war. It's a calm, grounded statement that radiates quiet power. You don't have to raise your voice, because it's the stillness in this phrase that shakes a narcissist to the core. When you say, That's not going to work on me. You're doing exactly what a manipulator fears most. You expose their game and then calmly walk away from it, untouched. You show them that their old tactics, blame-shifting, emotional blackmail, crocodile tears, playing the victim, no longer work on you. And for a narcissist, that is more devastating than a direct attack. Because they no longer have control. You may have once been the one who always explained, always apologized, always tried to keep the peace, but now you're no longer reacting. You don't need their approval. You're no longer pulled into the pit of guilt and confusion. You see the game for what it is, and you refuse to play. That's why this phrase is so powerful. It signals that you've built emotional immunity to manipulation. It's an invisible boundary, silent but impenetrable. You might hear responses like, "Why? Are you being so cold? I'm just trying to talk. You really think I did this on purpose?" But you don't waver. You don't argue. You don't explain why you're disengaging, because you've learned a hard truth. Not everyone deserves access to your mind. This statement also sends a deeper message. I've outgrown my fear. You're no longer afraid of being abandoned, no longer afraid of being misunderstood, and most importantly, you're no longer afraid of peace. You choose clarity over chaos. You choose boundaries over people-pleasing. You choose yourself, and in the eyes of a narcissist, that is terrifying. Remember, a manipulator doesn't need you to love them. They need you to believe you need them. And when you calmly dismantle that illusion with a phrase like, "That's not going to work on me," you don't just reclaim your power, you collapse the entire control structure they tried to build. 7. Let's not pretend this is something it's not. This is the sentence that shatters illusion. And for a narcissist, nothing is more devastating than being dragged out of the fantasy world they've worked so hard to manipulate. When you say this, you are refusing to play the game of make-believe, the one where they twist reality to fit their ego-driven script. You don't shout. You don't accuse. You don't mock. You simply lay down the truth, with a calm that cuts deeper than rage. This phrase hits hard because it exposes the act they've been trying to sell. "I'm just trying to help. We're having a healthy discussion." Or worse, "I'm doing this because I love you." These masks can fool outsiders, but when you look them in the eye and say, "Let's not pretend this is something it's not," you tear the mask off. And that's when their facade starts to crumble. Because you're no longer under the spell, you see them clearly, and you're calling it out. Nothing throws a narcissist off balance faster than someone who can name the truth they're desperate to hide. This phrase carries even more power because it demands accountability. It doesn't let them dodge, blame, or spin the story. It shuts down the stage they try to build and drags them into reality, a reality where they are no longer the director of the script. And when they lose control of the narrative, they lose control of you. Remember, you don't need to scream the truth for it to be powerful. You just need to say it with clarity and calm. Let's not pretend this is something it's not. And then, silence. That's when you reclaim the narrative. Not by fighting, but by refusing to be led. You become the only one who defines your reality, and that is something a narcissist simply cannot tolerate. 8. I choose not to engage. This is a conscious choice, not an act of avoidance. It's not running away. It's intentionally stepping away from a toxic game you used to be pulled into. When you say, "I choose not to engage," you are declaring that you have control over your own reactions, that you are no longer led by anger, guilt, or the need for validation from someone who only knows how to manipulate. A narcissist can't stand this. They want your reaction. They want your arguments. They want you in the game, because that's when they hold the power. But when you step back in calmness, they lose direction. Not because you're weak, but because you've become strong enough to no longer need to fight. You don't need to win against them. You just need to refuse to play with them, And that is the most devastating defeat for a manipulator, being ignored by someone they once believed would always react. This phrase is a declaration: you are no longer in control of my emotional state, and it terrifies them because it exposes the truth, that you've reclaimed your inner sovereignty. They might rage, they might mock, they might play the victim, but no matter what they do, you can calmly repeat, "I choose not to engage," and walk away. Maybe you never screamed, maybe you never retaliated, but it's the calm, the clarity, and these razor-sharp sentences that narcissists never forget. Because when you no longer react, you're no longer their puppet. You become the one who rewrites the script, and when you walk away from the game, in silence, with composure, you become what they fear most, someone they can't control. Remember this. You don't need to shout to prove your strength. All you have to do is stand still and say things like, "I'm not explaining myself again." Assess your opinion. "I choose not to engage." Each phrase is a key that unlocks your freedom. Each silence is a declaration, "I no longer live in your storm." And if these calm responses spoke to you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to break free from a toxic dynamic. You deserve peace, you deserve freedom, and you deserve to be fully yourself without asking for permission.